Alright, DC Universe Classics fans, welcome back to the next edition of the Director's Commentary on Mattel's quintessential 6-inch DC line. This is Wave 12, and I'm Scott ToyGuru Neitlich, the brand manager for DCU Classics, and also a collector, which kind of helps me stand out in the industry. Now, Wave 12, jumping right in, was the first wave to get all new packaging. I've spoken in some other videos about the need to refresh packaging every year, or every year and a half-ish, to keep retail interest and consumer interest as well. So it being the 75th anniversary of DC Comics, this became the theme for the new packaging. And we also, not only did we do these all-star figures in this packaging, but also the basic figures. So Wave 12 was the first basic figure line to get this brand new package with the art going down the side and the big 75th logo and, bright new, it's an evolution, not a revolution. And of course, it also included these awesome DC 75th buttons. I mean, not actually these buttons, but DC buttons and comic book buttons are things that are kind of very comic book, very industry. They go back, decades of people collecting buttons, and this was kind of a cool added bonus we thought would also speak to the heritage of DC Comics that we could include with the figures. And each of the buttons featured artwork from a comic book from the history of DC, featuring that villain. So that was kind of the idea, and I think it worked well. It was a cool little bonus, and hey, if you didn't collect buttons, and no harm, no foul. But if you did, yay. This was also, I think, really the first wave that we really started going deep. More or less, we were out of A-list heroes, and we were now going to really start mining the DC universe proper to keep expanding it and make 6-inch figures. Yes, there were some A-list characters that we still had to get to, and every wave that didn't include Martian Manhunter was one that I got hate mail from. But hey, we'll get to that next wave. So without further ado, we're going to jump into Wave 12 and kind of give just like all the other videos, give a little overview. So this wave had Desaad, it had the first Metal Man in the line, it had Dr. Mid-Nite and his owl buddy, it had Eclipso and his Diamond of Evil, it had Mary Marvel in 2 different shades, 2 different flavors, it had Copperhead, another old-time DC villain, the Spectre, not to be confused with Spectre Creative. And as I said, we were going deep. We were really riding high. This was kind of, I think, even the wave that we had outpaced the original Toy Biz Marvel Legends. This was before Hasbro really took it over and kept going. So we were feeling like, wow, we're kind of becoming the definitive superhero line here now that we've got more waves than Marvel Legends did, or we're getting close to that. So we do things like partner with Toy Fair magazine to reveal new figures back when, magazines were a huge thing, and boy, do I miss Toy Fair. So let's jump into the first figure. So first off, we're going to get to the first Metal Man figure in the line. And if you know your chemistry symbols, it's iron, based on, the symbol on his chest and what he's made of. So this figure had swappable hands and big metal parts that could clip onto his arms. And he was made of metal. He was our first figure that actually had metal parts to him. Definitely received some special love, and I think that a big part of that is we were starting off a brand new team, which I definitely come from sort of the school of once you start a team, you're more or less obligated to the fans to finish it. And, yes, I know we didn't do their creator, but, we did eventually get to all the members of the team. And a big part of this is Bill Beneke. This was really a wave that Bill kind of really took creative control of the line. The Four Horsemen are still sculpting everything, but we've done so many waves now that we had a lot of trust with DC and Warner Brothers, and they really trusted what we were doing. And Bill was just such a fabulous designer. He put so much love into these figures, and he loved DC action figures so much that he really went above and beyond. And a perfect example is the die-cast parts, the hands, that Iron had here. So, he had some heft to him. And we did wind up getting to finish that Metal Men and Woman team eventually, which was great. Again, I feel like you can't start a team without finishing it. And I'm so glad we got to all of them. Next up, we have a big bad of the DC Universe in the form of Eclipso. So, Eclipso has had a few origins over the years, related to snakes and diamonds and moons and all sorts of things. He was even reinvented in the JLU line and or universe, but still kind of kept that costume briefly. Eclipso was actually, this was my very first DC comic, this one here. This was the first DC comic I ever got. So getting to do Eclipso was actually a big deal for me because it was kind of fulfilling that childhood fantasy of, getting to read this comic, and then now I finally got to make a figure of him. Not that he hasn't had figures before, but getting to work on a figure of a childhood villain, that's really cool. And, once again, Bill Beneke with putting the diamond actually molded into his hand and making that piece out of clear plastic so that the diamond would be clear. I mean, that's very Bill to do that. And, him putting that extra love into the figures. He had a great pose. I mean, that was the Horseman. The way they really got the hands and the smile and, the arching fingers. I just feel like this figure really had a lot of energy. And, he used the thinner buck, which we already had, and so it was minimal new parts, new belt, new head, and, new hands, obviously, because of the fingers and holding the diamond. But, not too complicated of a figure to do, but really stands out. And, anytime you can do a figure that's got elf ears and half face paint, that's pretty cool in my book. We obviously looked at a lot of different iterations of Eclipso over the years, talking about which version to do. Ultimately, we tended to leave it to the Horsemen. We didn't often instruct them exactly which one to do. We kind of let them have free reign over that. Every once in a while, we would say, steer towards this decade or steer towards the classic version. And, I think they really nailed him, and they kind of got a really great quintessential version of Eclipso. And speaking of, speaking of the Spectre, you kind of saw his cloak there in that last image. As a counterpoint to Eclipso, we had Spectre, arguably probably one of the most powerful characters in DC, if not all comic books. I mean, this guy's got godlike powers, if you will. And again, much like Eclipso, there's been a couple versions of him over the years. Different characters have been the Spectre, different origins, things like that. But we wanted to really go with that, that quintessential version. Obviously there's Hal Jordan, even the Green Lantern was the Spectre for a while, but this was not the time to do a Hal Jordan version. This was really time to do a very classic white with green cloak and green underwear on the outside of his pants, a la Superman and Batman and every other superhero that does that fashion sense. Why do they wear their underwear on the outside of their pants? I have no idea. But it does make a really good look visually. And, Spectre does do that. He really pops in package. And once again, Bill Beneke, going the extra mile, did a variant of him with glow-in-the-dark skin. No change to the sculpt, no change to any of the deco, meaning the face. There's really not much deco on him at all. I guess maybe the eyes. He's got very little deco, very little paint. But glow-in-the-dark plastic. And that made the figure have a really cool sort of action feature, similar to, I guess, Scare Glow in the Masters of the Universe line back in the day and the Classics line in modern times. And, it worked really well for who the character was. This is all Bill. I mean, Bill would come up with this kind of stuff when he was tasked to do variants. All right. Then we have Dr. Mid-Nite. So this is the character that was getting kind of a new love in the Justice League, Justice Society, excuse me, not Justice League International, Justice Society, in the sort of the reboot that was happening at the time. But he is a classic character that goes, back decades and decades. And his look really hasn't changed that much from, the Golden Age all the way up through today. He has more or less had the same costume. So it was pretty easy to zero in on how to transform him from the comic book page to the toy shelf. You just kind of had to take all the visual cues. And he got an owl. Any character that comes with an animal buddy is just, awesome in my mind. And I'm really surprised we actually never reused this owl. Well, actually, not totally surprised, because this owl would have been owned by DC, as opposed to the Zorbird, which was owned by Mattel. I'll do another video actually upcoming about how licensing works and reusing parts in other lines. So yeah, that's actually probably why we didn't reuse the owl, because the owl was created for a DC character as opposed to a Mattel-owned character, or sort of owned. That's a whole other story. Okay, Mary Marvel. There's other videos. You can check them out about who owns Masters of the Universe. I have not been shy about my love for the Marvel family and or Shazam family, whatever you want to call them. I always think of them as the Marvel family, and even the C.C. Beck comic from Fawcett in the 40s. DC eventually acquired Shazam and all the Fawcett characters. And, you know, secret single behavior, if there was one superheroine that I was going to say I have a crush on, it would be Mary Marvel. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I love, you know, the Marvel family so much, and she's the female version. But everyone, I think, has that, you know, that one superhero / superheroine that they could admittedly say they have a crush on. And for me, it's Mary. So, yay, Mary. All right. This version being her variant in her white outfit, which she often wore. She kind of sometimes would wear white, sometimes wear red. And hey, she occasionally even wore black. In fact, she was wearing kind of black at the time that this figure came out, and I was really pushing to do 3 variants. I wanted to do the black one as well. And I even tried to find other ways to get the black version in there, probably because I like Mary so much. But we never got to the black one. It would have been a straight repaint too. But we did, you know, we got to at least 2, and that was pretty awesome as we continued to build out the Marvel family with Billy and Black Adam and now Mary. And even eventually we would be able to build it out even farther by finally getting to Freddy in the DC Signature series on Matty Collector, kind of the tail end of DCU Classics. So it was, you know, we never got to Hoppy or, you know, Uncle, but hey, at least we got to the main guys. Also with Mary, you'll notice she does not have ab crunch, and this was also something Bill did. He was very adamant that she be accurate to the way the costume looked, and felt that if it gave her ab crunch, it was going to take away from the look of the way the tunic and the costume was supposed to flow on her body. So I know some fans were upset she didn't have ab crunch, but that's the reason why, is Bill, from a design point, felt it just wasn't going to work. All right, back to the dark side from the light side. You know, like yogurt says, that there's a light side and a dark side to everything. Copperhead. So Copperhead is one of DC's sort of, I guess, signature snake villains. I guess kind of Eclipso is too, in a way, but not in the same way. He doesn't dress up like a giant snake the way Copperhead does. So here is Copperhead back in the heyday, and again, his costume has not changed that much. He's got a little bit more color, with some green highlights brought into the yellow, but more or less he's a guy in a snake outfit. My introduction to Copperhead was from the Justice League Unlimited or Justice League animated series, The Bruce Timm Show, where he was a core member of a villain team. But the character, as I've said, you know, over and over again with a lot of figures, is very toyetic. You know, I mean, it's a guy in a giant snake outfit where his face, his human face, pops out of the snake head in the mouth. I mean, you know, talk about appealing to, you know, young kids. That's just awesome. And you can tell he's a villain just by looking at him and the way he's designed. He translates very well from the comic book page to the toy shelf. And anytime you can get a character like that who has those toyetic qualities, it's going to help them sell once the collectors have already sort of picked the pegs clean. And, you know, I mean, he fits right in there even with He-Man there, you know, as like a snake man. So I don't know if some people recruit him as their King Hiss shelf. But he was pretty much fully sculpted because there was a lot of detail in the body with all those scales, the you know, the snake scales, if you will. And man, look at that face, the Horseman. Man, I love the Horseman. I got to do a video just about how great the Horsemen are when they do sculpts. All right, let's see. Rounding out the basic figures, we had Desaad. Desaad, the number 1 flunky of Darkseid from Apocalypse. So here he was back in his origin or his original days, as designed by Jack Kirby. He is a monk. I mean, he's not a monk, but he basically looks like that. He's just a guy in a big purple robe. And definitely a figure, I think, that even got questioned when we brought him into Senior Core to review. We had to have every wave approved by management. And they're looking at this guy like, you want to do a guy in like a big purple robe? Are you sure kids are going to be into this and collectors are going to be into this? Because, again, while the line is aimed at collectors, kids have to make up the bulk of sales. Well, there's a long history of kids loving villain sidekicks. And, collectors too. Disney does this very well, and, every good villain is going to have a good sidekick. And Desaad is, sort of the evil sidekick of Darkseid, but from a collector standpoint, he was in the Superpowers line. And that's why he looks like that. That's why he's wearing the, the chest computer, and why he's in the purple robes. We, much like other waves, and I've mentioned how much Superpowers influenced this line, our goal was to get to all the Superpowers figures. So Desaad had to be gotten to, which, he, again, required a lot of tooling. He needed, all these robes, which we didn't have in our tooling bank, but now we did. And hey, if we wanted to do future monk-type characters that were part of the DC universe, now we had the tooling to do that, as well as this giant, awesome chest torture device weapon thingy. I'm sure there's a specific name for it that I don't know off the top of my head. And you can leave that in the comments and make me feel, better. Okay, the big bad, the Build-A-Figure, the Collect and Connect figure, TM and copyright. There he is, Mr. Darkseid himself, Lord of Apocalypse, Scourge of Carpathia, Sorrow of Moldavia. No, maybe not those last two things. But Darkseid is the Lord of Apocalypse, and he is one of DC Comics' real big bads. As far as, a character that can just, take over the Earth and defeat every possible superhero, and, he has over time. He's also been beaten by almost every superhero, so I guess, tit for tat. But he is definitely one of the more recognizable DC figures. Now, he did come, from a toy perspective, in this case, with this big gold glove that could interchange on his hand. And no, it is not the Infinity Gauntlet. Although I think at the time it came out, less people would have thought it was. Now everybody knows what the Infinity Gauntlet is from the Marvel movies with the live action. But no, it is the Killing Glove, which he wore in the Jack Kirby comics, which basically did exactly what you think. It killed. So, again, it was a cool way to add something else to Darkseid, especially because we had done him before. But the important thing here was that he had some added features, like the Killing Glove, but he was also at the right scale. He towered over Superman. When we had previously done Darkseid in the DC Superheroes line, he was the same size as Superman. So you can see here, that's him in the middle there with the DC Direct and the DC Universe Classics version flanking him behind, and the size proportions are definitely corrected. So, also throw in the JLU figure. So, yeah, and 2 more figures in the Superpowers lineup. This is great. We're doing awesome. We're deep diving. Wave 12 is in the bag, and we're on our way to Wave 13.